Good evening, Bill. All right, good evening, everybody. Let's give everybody another minute or so to sign on, and then we'll get started. Good evening. Evening, John. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Jose, I think, do we have most folks here?
Yeah, just about. I think we're missing a few, but I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody to this October 13th, 2020 meeting of the Reston Task Force. I do want to make sure everybody saw the draft agenda that was sent around. Hopefully everyone has that. We're going to actually shift gears a little bit tonight. We're going to really start out with the agenda being, the topics being a little more reflective, and also talk a little bit about process. We heard a couple of comments from task force members in the last meeting, some ideas about and comments about process and pace. So wanted to talk a little bit about that, and also some other ideas that have been floated regarding the task force activities. After that, we've got a presentation from the Department of Planning and Development to go over the policy plan and area plan session, a little bit more background and insight from DPD staff on how different parts of the comprehensive plan are applied and how they're used during the development review process. So that's coming up a little bit later in the meeting. And as always, we'll have the opportunity for people to ask questions or make comments at various times, including at the end of the meeting. So at this point, does anyone have any questions or comments on the agenda that has been circulated. And at this point, feel free, if you do have any comments or questions, just go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay, then let's dive right in. And I don't think, at least until we get a lot of people jumping in with comments or questions during this first part of the meeting, go ahead and if you have a question or comment, go ahead and just directly unmute yourself. I will be watching for raised hands, but I think this will probably be quicker. As you can see under item 2, there are a number of topics. First, starting with some ideas for improving communication. Jose, do you want to, who's going to talk to this particular one?
I believe Chris Caperton wanted to share some of the stuff there.
Okay, there's one idea. Chris, are you on? Do you want to talk to this? And then we'll open up for questions or suggestions.
Sure, Supervisor Alcorn. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Yes.
Chris.
So this is Chris Caperton. I'm Deputy Director in the Department of Planning and Development. And we've been working with the Hunter Mill office and our Office of Public Affairs to explore the potential launch of a pilot Facebook group. As you may know, the Department of Planning, as well as the Hunter Mill office, have a presence on Facebook. We've never done Facebook groups before, so this pilot would be focused on Reston activities that are supporting this, obviously this study and this plan amendment process. The idea being that this would be open to the public. The task force has the listserv, a means by which they can communicate to other task members, but this would be a way of opening the dialogue a little bit more to the general public, so the public would be allowed to see information and items that are posted and to comment on those as well. We would probably post it with the same Fairfax County rules and guidelines that we ask all posters to abide by when they're on these sort of public forums. And we'll have to monitor that and be cognizant of the tone and tenor of the conversations taking place. So this is an idea. The county has never done a Facebook group before. It shouldn't be that daunting, but it is a first time. So we're kind of calling it a pilot to just sort of see how it works out. But we're interested in any thoughts or questions or feedback that our listeners tonight might have, and you can direct those questions and comments either to the Hunter Mill office or to the Department of Planning and Development. And we're glad to take that into consideration as we consider the potential launch of this Facebook group. That's kind of it in a nutshell, Supervisor. I don't know if there's any feedback or reaction from anybody.
This is Burton Griffith jumping
Yeah, Burton.
in.
Please.
A couple thoughts is wondering if you've considered and pros and cons of a Facebook group, Facebook page, and thought about requiring people who are interested in commenting to prove that they're a Fairfax County resident or the Facebook group should, I don't know if there's like a difference in privacy versus different privacy levels that you can select and whether you've thought about that. I know you can have a private Facebook group, which if I'm commenting, private group where Fairfax County staff accepts people into the group, and then they're free to comment within the group as much as they'd like using an account that reflects their actual identity and not a fake identity, and comfortable commenting in a situation like that versus a Facebook page, which would to anyone on the internet.
Chris, do you want to address, I don't know if you caught all that. Burton, you were fading in and out just a little bit, but I think we caught almost everything you said. Chris,
Yeah, I think I caught that, Burton. Thank you for the comment, and I've made note of it. We haven't talk specifically about the exclusivity of the page. I think the idea is that it would be open to the public, and I think we run into some problems if we try to pre-screen or identify people before they're allowed to post. I mean, someone might live in Maryland, but they might work in Reston and have valid comments about their workplace, and vice versa. So I just don't. I can talk to OPA about this. I am one of the least well-versed persons in Facebook. I just signed up for it last week in anticipation of this page being put up. So I don't know all the nuances and all the controls that we might be able to put on. I understand the concern, and we certainly wouldn't want to have to respond to far-fetched comments or comments from people that aren't even in the state or something like that. So I understand the concern. I'll explore that with our Office of OPA at Hunter Mill as we anticipate this launch.
Well, the other concern or issue is that people who use their real name on Facebook, if they're commenting on something, and they live in Northern Virginia, they're commenting on something they care about, and that indicates what they care about. It indicates where they live, and it's information that they're putting out there for anyone in the world to see. So I guess I'm sure the county has other ways for people to provide input, like sending an email, but it's just an issue that comes to mind as just as initial reaction for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Burton. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this?
Yes, David Bennell here. I totally agree with Burton. I think working Facebook in a public venue, which would be, of course, the easiest way to do it, is just fraught with all kinds of problems about identities of the people who are participating, and also potentially attracting God knows who just wants to play games and disrupt stuff, including bots and things like that. I think that if we're going to do something on Facebook, which has its own gigantic set of issues, we need to lock it down. And I understand the desire to have the public comment, the public review, the public participation in that, but there's got to be some way that can be monitored or that can be regulated so that you are on in your true name, but then how far do you want that to go? And if you want it to keep in a locked down group, that's probably, I know I would feel more comfortable with that. So that's my comment.
I'd like
David, I appreciate that. And is that Tammy? And
Yes.
I did see John Mooney with his hand up, like his real hand. But Tammy, go ahead, and then John.
Yeah, thank you very much. My concern is very close to the previous two speakers. My concern is that we might get a bunch of silent supporters here that are all employees or spouses of developers who are saying, yay, let's do this or that, or on the other hand, going for the other side. So I don't want this to become an adversarial thing. I think it needs to be cooperative. I think we need to exchange as many ideas as we can and come to the best compromise that we can for the good of keeping Reston healthy and functioning and a home for all. So that my concern is that this not become a forum that every question has to be answered and you don't know who exactly is commenting and why they're commenting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tammy. And Lynn, thank you for your comment. John.
I identify myself with the three previous folks. And besides concerns about identity authentication, I'm concerned about any implied promise to incorporate the points made by whoever registers in this Facebook page, and also then the corresponding question: how do we weigh the opinions of peoples whose identity we cannot authenticate?
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Sounds like there's a pretty strong trend here. These thoughts, pretty consistent. Anyone else want to toss in any other ideas? Yeah, Jan, I see you. Jan, I think you're still muted.
So I am. So I'll go back to the beginning. Hi, I'm Jan, and I've been listening to the conversation. I was thinking, why not try it as a private thing first and see how that goes, and then enlarge it if that's feasible down the end. But try it small, try it private, and see. That would be our first step to seeing how that's going to be working. And then we can revisit this at a later time.
Okay, thank you very much, Jan. And I think Christopher Daniel and Charles Colby both have their hands up too.
Sure, thanks, Walter. Having been on Facebook since 2004 and deleted my account 2 years ago, I kind of agree with my other task force members that it's not the most safe information conduit anymore. But if it is something the county wants to pursue, I think moderation by the county and some set guidelines for content are going to be some really key factors for if it's going to happen.
Okay, thank you very much, Christopher. Charles, you want to go? And then there are a couple of other folks I see, Mark and Gary.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm more for the tech option. I think this is the way people like to communicate. So I'm glad that the county is experimenting with it. We created one for a community I live at in Delaware, and it's worked out very well. People have given a lot of good feedback, and it's been very civil. We had one next door thing for our community, and it got out of control. I think it could have been addressed as long as you moderate it. And one thing you could do is you could require to be approved to enter the group, but what you could do is just have some warm-up questions. And I've had this in other groups I've joined where you just ask things like, are you interested in affairs in Reston, and so on and so on. And that would then keep people who are just robots or hacker type. So as long as it's controlled, I think it's a really great idea.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Let's go to Mark and then Gary, and then I do want to move on.
A reference to this, it's just like any other planning group. You work from a smaller group that is the task force is that you have the second level, which is when you have the private group that expands outward to help refine. But don't lose sight at the end of this, it's still for Fairfax County and all of this area as a whole that you plan for what is the process for public comment to what is closer to the end product before it goes final on that. You've got to get the public input in a controlled way and plan for it as if this goes forward, plan for what is the step beyond as part of this process so that when people join the private group and they express outward, it's how will public comment eventually be done? Is there a tended schedule for when that would be occurring if it is in whole to the entire effort of the task force or in parts to subtopics of the task force? Anyway, it's a thought process. It's a normal process that we'd use in federal government.
All right, thank you very much, Mark. Let's go to Gary, and then let's move on. Gary, did you want to chime in?
Sorry, I didn't unmute. So I'll just say I agree with most of the commenters, the first four and others, of concern for this. Also, us being the guinea pig and it goes awry. I don't think the county wants failure, and I'm sure we don't want one. Or to read a headline, Facebook was up in Fairfax County or something like that, or certainly here in Reston. Just some thoughts.
All right, thank you very much. This is a lot of good comments, a lot of things for county staff to think about. I think at this point, Chris, why don't we do this? Why don't you go back, take what you've heard tonight, talk with some other folks in the Office of Public Affairs and see what options might be available, and then come back to the task force either via email or maybe at the next meeting and kind of talk through some options. Is that okay, Chris?
Oh, absolutely. We'll do, Supervisor. Thank you. Thanks for all the comments and feedback.
Yeah, and thanks to everybody. Obviously, everyone is taking this very seriously and very thoughtful. So I do very much appreciate that. So let's move through some of these other ideas here in the open discussion. I actually want to hold off on doing 2B at this point because we have several other process-related topics. And since we're having a good discussion on process, let's jump to that. So if everybody's okay with that, let's jump to 2C, and we'll come back to 2B in a few minutes. But 2C is creation of subgroups to hammer out language on specific comments. So this was a suggestion actually I got from a couple of task force members. I think what we're looking here, and initially I was hoping that we could have all of our discussions, all the work be done at task force meetings. I think what we've discovered, at least in the wordsmithing phase of this task force, that some of that is probably best done in subgroups or subcommittee. And I think we saw this when we worked on the planning principles, and frankly, there were several folks that took the time and were interested in providing input, and that got worked out amongst a few folks with John Carter actually as leading the little effort on pulling together the language for the planning principles. So what I would throw out there as an idea, and see if anybody has any other ideas, is that when we have a topic that requires wordsmithing along the lines of what we saw with the planning principles, that during a task force meeting, we identify one or two chairs or co-chairs of that particular subgroup, whatever the topic is. And then any task force members that are interested in working in that subgroup and to help the wordsmithing would be welcome to do so. So let's plan on doing that. And I would hope, and I guess I would ask that these would be thought of as email-based working groups, as an opportunity to, again, to do the wordsmithing, to exchange ideas via email, that kind of thing. And then, of course, back to the full task force, the product of the subgroups work. Does anybody have any thoughts or suggestions or any concerns about that approach? Okay, I see shaking of heads, which I think means it's okay. And a couple of thumbs up. All right.
I have just one question, Walter.
Yes, John.
And that is, in doing this, do we have to make sure, do we have to be careful about not violating any open meeting requirements? That, I mean, it depends on how large the subgroup is, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think we're okay. I think we're okay on that. But John, before we finalize this going into the next meeting, let me double check with county staff on that. I appreciate you flagging it. But yes, we always have to balance our process with the need to make sure that we are compliant with open meeting requirements. So thank you, John. We'll make sure that's okay before going forward with any process like that. Okay, any other questions or comments?
Hi, I have a quick question. This is Moira.
Yes, hi, Moira.
So if we are an alternate, which I am, is the person who's on the committee is going to be attending those meetings and I would be sitting in on those or attending those as the alternate? Who's that? Who's the breakout for? Is it for the person who's sitting on the panel and I would just fill in if that person cannot?
I think it would be fine since these are primarily, wordsmithing exercises and groups, subgroups. I'm fine with alternates being a part of them. So,
Okay.
where alternates want to help out with the wording. When it does come back, and ultimately when we get to the point of voting, then that would just be the principal's voting at that point, unless the principal's not there in the alternate.
Okay, thanks for just wanted to know what my role is going to be. Thank you.
Good question. Okay. Any other questions or comments on that process? Okay, then let's skip to the next process related issue. And again, we'll come back to 2B. I'm not going to forget that. But 2D, this I can't overemphasize how appreciative I am for everybody to work with us on this virtual process and to get this process going and to get this task force going. But we have been constantly looking for opportunities to, along with the communications discussion we had earlier about the Facebook groups, we've also been looking to see where there might be an opportunity to at least have the group meet partially in person. And of course, our main concern here is for our collective safety and public health. So there is an option. I'm not sure if it's the right time to do this, but Jose, do you want to talk a little bit about, well, if you could, Jose, talk a little bit about what we were going to do before the pandemic hit and what still might be available now that we still have COVID-19 out there in terms of a hybrid of in-person and virtual meetings.
Yeah, sure. So before COVID, we had reserved space at RCC Lake Ann in the Joanne Rose Gallery. And we still have those dates available. That's not the problem. Just the major thing is capacity issues. So there's a maximum capacity of there of 40 people, socially distanced and spaced out. So we're a pretty big group with staff and task force members and alternates, including everything else. And then just other considerations is probably audio, video quality, live streaming it, trying to figure out the WebEx stuff. But yeah, that's really where it's at, and trying to get everyone's thoughts on, if this is something that we should try doing or holding off to a later meeting.
Does anyone have any immediate thoughts about trying to move to some sort of a hybrid where we would have a limited number of people in the room at the same time, and then everyone else still participate electronically? Somebody? Yeah, yes. Dennis, I see your hand up, and
yeah,
I see a lot of hands, like virtual hands.
Yeah, I'll start if you like. I think it's a great idea. I think it would be much more efficient, even if it's just a portion of us in the room at one time. The dynamic is there. As you know, everybody has their own level of comfort as to what they want to do in all this, but I think there would be a portion of the team that would be prepared to be in the environment that Jose just mentioned. And so I think it'd be a great idea, and I'm all for it.
All right, thanks, Dennis. I'm just going to work down the list where I see people with hands raised electronically. Tammy, why don't you go next?
Thank you. I am opposed to this. I think we're about to hit the COVID second phase. I don't think there's one person on this group that would want to sacrifice to getting sick, including yourself. So I think it's premature. For sure, the energy in a room with real people, exchanging body language, etc., is invaluable. But I just don't think we're there yet, and I'm sad to say that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tammy. Let's go to Charles. Did you have your hand up for this? Charles, you may have had your hand up before.
Yeah, I couldn't put I couldn't put it down. So
I'm sorry, Charles, but anyway, okay.
I'm neutral on this. The only issue when you have it in person is, I've had issues. Just think about how the meeting acoustics work. Is hearing people if you're socially distanced and we're wearing masks. That could just be me, you know.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Charles. I see Michelle Kimmel has her hand up. Michelle, do you want to?
Yeah, personally, I won't go first anytime. So I do hope that we can keep an option, but also for you know, speaking and have to give up a whole amount of time away from my family. So
All right. Thank you for sharing that, Michelle. Bruce, you want to go next?
Yeah, I wanted to say I agreed with Tammy that I don't think this is the right time. I also don't think, as a matter of fairness and effectiveness, it's much easier to be persuasive to engage in person, and persons that would not feel comfortable or for other reasons would be participating at a distance would not have the same opportunity to participate. I think this is may not be perfect, but it's a level playing field for participation.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. I see Alvarez. Alvarez, go right ahead. Go ahead and unmute yourself there.
Okay. What I was thinking was, at this point, the first thing might be to find out those who would be willing to do it. I think in person, if it's possible, it is good. I also think, on the last comment, I don't know if there would be a big difference the way we're operating between virtual or in person, because I think all of us have an opportunity to speak. And I don't see anyone here that's shy to speak on something. So I know I could not attend personally because of the issues that we have that's predisposed, age and other conditions. So if we find out if there's a small group or a group that want to do it, begin with, and then follow from there when it's possible, and if we can, and mention that we'll continue to be virtual. So, but I think the first thing is, there any that can do it, and then decide, you know, what to do from there. But I could not.
All right. Thank you very much, Alvarez. Appreciate that input. Anybody else that would like to speak? I see some hands up, but I think some of them may be from previous discussions.
Burton, yes, I have some comments. Yes. Yeah. So kind of relating to your point 2D about the long-term effect, I think that, you know, when we started out doing this virtually, I thought it was a workaround that eventually we were going to move past, but as it's been happening, I think it actually definitely has some advantages over in-person meetings. And to try to do a combination, virtual and in-person, seems really complicated to work out. In that right now, being that we're all attending remotely, we all have equal access. We all have our own video, whether we choose to use it or not, camera. We all have our own microphone. And if you move it to partially in person, logistically, it seems like it would be a challenge to have everyone who's in person be masks with the people who are remote. And then, you know, we'd be missing out on the body language if we're not there. So I think that a big advantage to in-person is that it really encourages you to pay attention to what's going on. That when you're remote, you can easily just sort of tune it out and multitask, where you can't do that when you're physically in the room. But I think overall, we're better staying with virtual meetings for now.
Thanks very much, Burton, for your comment there. Anyone else want to comment on this topic? Gary, go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm kind of where Alvarez is, that if we have enough people that want to be in person, I think those things could be worked out so others could, you know, participate like they are today. So by finding out I'm willing to be there, you know, what people think individually for the whole group would be useful to you, I think, in the county.
Okay, that's helpful. So, Jose, let me put you on the spot a little bit. So, Jose, would it be possible for you perhaps to poll the task force members, you know, maybe through a Survey Monkey or something like that? Yeah, Jose, would that be possible?
Hey, Walter, this is Chris Daniel. I have to say,
Chris.
The Architectural Review Board is also struggling with this question as well, because we are now meeting digitally once a month, reviewing applications. And while we're a very small board compared to this task force, it is another thing that I have similar concerns have been expressed by our board members, as well as the risk to applicants who would have to come in. I think the first thing we've been approaching is having a plan for what that would even look like if there was a staggered return to quasi-normal. And being a parent of a small child, and both my wife and I work from home right now, we try to limit our circles as much as possible. So I think there's also a responsibility that comes on any member if we started doing that, of disclosing if they did have a contact with someone. We'd have to have a process in place so that we don't put in jeopardy any other members, even though we'd be probably taking all the necessary precautions. And I agree with others, it leads right into your other point of what is the new normal now, given this current environment we're in.
Yeah, good points, Chris. All right, any other thoughts on this one? Mark, did you have your hand up?
Yes, very, very basic on this. The key is between what we do now, it's a level playing field. When you move to a hybrid, the one question that comes in is if something breaks down with the, if you will, the online versus the in-person meeting. Does the in-person meeting continue without the participation? That ground rule, once it's established, becomes very clear. Because where I used to work, it was common to do the hybrid meeting for the last several years. And it was well known on that. But the issue is, the transition is, if the meeting online breaks down, do you continue with the in-person meeting for that scheduled thing and then just do follow-up, or do you stop? That's the question that comes with this group. And then the follow-on is, how do you transition to, quote, not such a hazard of the COVID-19 environment, if you believe that to be a big hazard?
Thank you very much, Mark. And actually, let's segue that comment to, I actually have gotten a couple of texts this evening about the online streaming service. Lisa, can you update the group in terms of where we are on streaming right now? I think everybody's on the task force is fine. But Lisa, where are we in terms of streaming?
Hi, everybody. This is Lisa Connors, Supervisor Alcorn's Communications Director. We changed IT. We were the guinea pigs for doing WebEx way back when. And so we were on a trial version of WebEx, and they moved us over because the county decided to get a WebEx license. Unfortunately, when they moved us over, they forgot to tell us that we couldn't stream on YouTube. We'll figure that one out tomorrow. So if you know of anyone who was trying to watch the live stream on YouTube, we'll hopefully get that resolved. We'll at least get it resolved in time to tell everyone for the next meeting. But the meeting is being recorded, and it will be posted on YouTube tomorrow. So it will still be on our YouTube channel. They just weren't able to watch the live stream this evening. I apologize because we didn't realize this until right before the start of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Sorry about that, everybody. And I guess for the people that can't see us live right now, apologies as well. So let's wrap up the conversation on meetings in person. I think I've heard quite a few things, and we actually we've gotten several requests for more information on how this would work. I've seen some comments in the chat as well, some questions about technically how it would work. So I think at this point we would, Jose, I think maybe this is something we need to think a little bit more about, maybe put together a draft plan for future consideration of the task force for moving forward, but it sounds like we might not be ready at this point.
Hi there.
Yes, Jan.
Yeah. So my thing is to wait. I know that there were, 1,280 something cases, new cases in Virginia just this week that had been here, I believe, part of the time and part are new. In Europe, the cases they're starting to appear more and more regularly. So I would say wait. Also, in terms of health, I think it would be great to continue to maintain that safety as long as we can.
Thank you, Jan. Appreciate that. I appreciate everybody's input on this tonight. Is there anybody else that wanted to make any final comments on this one? Okay. All right. So I've heard definitely more. Let's hold off for now, and some other suggestions. I think what we'll do is we'll go back and maybe put some more thought to what kind of approach we would do should we get to the point as the task force for meeting in person. You know, if that does become safe, you know, in the foreseeable future, we'll be ready for that. And if folks have other thoughts or suggestions, you know, please do shoot an email or call the office. This is certainly something Jose and I have been talking a lot about, and Lisa as well. So anyway, thanks everybody for your feedback and your input on that. So on the next one, let's go to 2E, and then I promise we're going to go back to 2B. But on 2E, one question. And Tammy, this is totally in response to your comment last meeting that and, you know, the anxiety level and the stress level right now for a lot of us it's pretty darn high, and you know, and we might want to slow down a little bit. That's one of the reasons we put this sort of broader discussion at the beginning of the agenda today. But the question is, do we want to take off October 26th and skip that meeting and then pick it up back in November? Tammy, do you have any, or
yes,
Tammy, any thoughts on that?
Thank you very much. I think that would be good, but in addition to that, I would like to set sort of an expectation of our how we're going to approach the plan. I would recommend, I don't know if he'd be willing to, but John Carter sort of to lay out how he's the planner that I know of. I'm sure there may be some others on this task force. He's a senior person and he's a planning commissioner, as were you. I would think he would have an idea of how we can structure so that when we do come back, that we have an expectation of where we're going and we can get the job done by the deadline that the board has set for you. Hopefully they'll give some grace because of the COVID situation and the slowdown. But I think we want to be cognizant that we have a job to do. It's very complicated and we want to do the very best job we can. Thank you.
Tammy, I think that's an excellent idea. Yeah, we will coordinate with Commissioner Carter on that. And I think actually with this process that we talked about earlier tonight of creating subgroups to tackle some issues, I think we could work that into a process document, if you will, Tammy, for moving forward. And so that's great. We can definitely come back the next meeting with a proposed process document that shows how we can work through this. Jan, I saw your hand pop up there.
Okay, good. I work Mondays and Tuesdays, so I'm off on I'm off Mondays and Tuesdays. I work Wednesday and I'm off Thursdays, but Wednesdays are really bad for me. And I could probably, be there with the phone, but I wouldn't get as much out of the meeting.
So actually, I hate to ask this, but everybody, could everybody else mute? Jan, I really didn't pick up what you said. If everybody could mute themselves for just a minute. Jan, if you could repeat that.
Okay, I am off work Mondays and Tuesdays. I work Wednesdays and I'm off Thursday. So if you have a meeting, the days I have off are Tuesday, Wednesday. No, the days I have off are Monday and Tuesday, but I also have Thursday off. The day that I cannot do it is Monday. Wednesday. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday are days off that I could meet.
All right, good to know. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Jan. And Gary, I saw you have your hand up.
I just second Tammy's suggestion there. I think that's a good one. Seems that work well in the principles, and there's enough time, for that kind of thing to be set up and John Carter to put things together and so forth. So it makes sense to me.
Thank you, Gary. Let's go to David Vanel.
Yes, just in response to the original question and Tammy's input, perhaps what we should try to do is shoot for once every 3 weeks or once every 4 weeks, barring some situation where if we have to meet every week, we have to meet every week. Or if we have to meet every 2 weeks, we have to meet every 2 weeks to get through some things. And we ought to be flexible about that. But I think rather than every 2 weeks, maybe every 3 weeks or so, 3 weeks, maybe 4 would be kind of a benchmark.
All right, thank you, David. And I think perhaps at a minimum with this plan and this new process, let's attach dates to it. And then we can have the task force talk about that and see if it all hangs together. So thank you.
Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Gordon, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. About the original point and, the distractions around the election, I think that it's, the stress of the presidential race is certainly affecting me, like a lot of people. But what I find is actually helpful in these situations is to focus on what you can control and what you can do at the local level, and that's what we're doing here. So, you know, I don't mind skipping the next meeting, but I think we all volunteered for this task force that it was going to be meetings about every 2 weeks, and so I'm okay with just sticking to that. I think if you spread it out over more than 2 weeks, more than every other week, then you're likely to like lose mental track of what was discussed and have trouble getting back up to speed again.
Okay, thank you, Burton. And I see Charles, do you have your hand up as well? Charles? That may be an old one.
I can't put my hand down.
Oh, I'm sorry, Charles. Okay, no problem. All right. Well, this is very helpful. Then that's good feedback. Let's plan on taking the October 26th meeting off, but we will come back. We'll confer with Commissioner Carter, come back with more of a process plan for review by the task force coming into the next meeting, and also have we'll think a little bit more and look at dates and see what kind of schedule we'll need to try to meet in order to get this wrapped up. I would say by the middle of next year is what we really need to shoot for. So thank you everybody for good feedback on that. Let's go back and hit 2B. Now 2B is more less of a process question, and it's really more of back to the discussion of a topic that was suggested by a couple of task force members very early on. And I guess this is a variation of that. But if you remember, we heard from a couple task force members suggest that with the pandemic, we may be seeing some significant change in work-life patterns in Reston, and how would that potentially affect our work in reviewing the comprehensive plan? I think at the time, many of us were unsure of how long the pandemic was going to last, what kind of long-term impact might there be, might snap back quite quickly. Since then, I certainly have, in my role as a member of some regional transportation bodies, have seen some survey data, both of employers in the region and also consumers in the region, that suggest that there may, in fact, at least appear to be some longer-term changes coming in terms of our live and work patterns. And the most obvious one is at least the potential increase in working from home, working remotely. And what that could well mean is a much slower growth rate, if not perhaps flattening out or even a decline in some cases of our office space and office uses in the county. So, so that's certainly something I'm seeing in the numbers. Concurrently with that, you should also know that as the Hunter Mill District Supervisor, from time to time, I do hear from landowners long before they file any sort of proposed change to their zoning of the property that they own. But I've heard from now 4 different landowners this year who own office properties outside of the TSA that are saying that their property is either empty or becoming empty, and they are interested in converting it to another use, mostly residential. It's mostly what I've heard. So I guess with those 2 thoughts in mind, should this task force perhaps have a conversation about how we as a community might want to get out in front of this, if in fact this is going to be somewhat of a trend during the coming years, and start thinking about when and how, or at least under what circumstances might it be okay for some of the office parks in Reston that are outside of our TSAs Some of those office parks might convert to residential or to mixed use, but something other than just an office park. So, or an office building. So I just to throw this out, and then I'll open it up for questions or comments. But there's some pretty basic questions that have come to my mind. For example, if it's an office park that has, say, 6 or 7 different office buildings along the street, should we be expecting that road configuration would stay the same? Or would we be thinking that there should be consolidation of parcels in order to, either account for the change in use or different configurations? Other things, like preservation of tree stands. We actually have some very nice tree stands in a number of these office parks. Should that be something that gets called out when landowners are thinking about redevelopment or changing the use of those properties? Should there be some sort of additional bonus towards affordable or workforce housing, that comes with this? So these are all the questions that have come to my mind. And currently, in at least the Reston part of the comprehensive plan, there's really not any guidance or anticipation of this. Or on the other hand, this task force might, we might talk about it and say, you know what, we don't want to do anything to encourage this, or we really should slow this down, or whatever. I mean, there are other ways that we could come at this, but I'll just open this up as a possible topic for discussion, and see who has thoughts out there. Dennis, I see your physical hand up, and then I see several electronic hands. Go ahead, Dennis.
Okay. Yeah, I would say this very much is in our portfolio at this time. We need to be looking long term. I think the key for me, of course, is balance. Reston has always been about balance. Combination of commercial, office, residential, all of these things go together. I think, clearly anybody who's lived in Reston over the past 20 years knows that there are short-term business cycles where one time everybody's running to build commercial, and then it turns around and everybody's running to build residential. And there's reasons for that. But overall, I think a group like ours, our function is to take a longer view and understand there are certain things that I think make Reston Reston. But for me, it's balance. I think we need to preserve that balance, and I'm including open space and all the other things into that concept. So, in shortly, just to wrap it up, yeah, I think this is something this group should deal with.
All right, Dennis, thank you very much. Mark, I see your hand up. Mark Looney.
Hi there. I would, I guess, echo the sentiment.
Hey, Mark, you faded out there. That's better, a little better.
Mark, I can't hear you. I can't hear you at all.
I can hear
you. Is that better?
That's better for me.
Off.
Nah.
Can hear.
Speak a little more. I can kind of hear it. I'm seeing shaking of heads, though. Hey, Mark, we'll come back to you, okay? We'll give you some time. Let's go to Jason Besky.
Hello. Yeah, I absolutely think this should be on the table. From a planning perspective, retrofitting these fields into, and I think we should do it more in, when we do this, what are the key principles? I think we need to keep in mind all along here that we're working on a comp plan, and that this needs to be kept at a policy level and some strategies. So I would say my recommendation would be that this group give staff guidance in what types of principles should be considered in that type of development. And in doing so, creating complete neighborhoods. So it's not, I would suggest not just taking a parking lot and plunking down, more apartment buildings, but let's look at this and it's holistically, what kind of public or open space is being provided? What's the mobility on the site? There's lots of other issues we could cover, but I think at this level and of a comp plan, we need to keep it policy oriented with some strategies involved with that. So those are my 2 cents.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lynn, let's go to you. You have your hand up.
Oh, thank you, Walter. I appreciate it. Gary, do you want to mute? Could everybody mute? Because there's a lot of feedback and thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I completely agree with what Dennis said in terms of balance for Reston. I'm sorry. I think that, as Dennis pointed out, there is a balance that has been defined for Reston from the onset, and that is a balance of residential, commercial, industrial, and I think that all of that needs to be taken into consideration.
All right, thank you very much, Lynn. Let's go to a couple other folks that have their hand up, haven't spoken yet this evening. Bill Pinneman.
Thank you. This is really a tough one because I think we'll say people probably have the slightest idea, but whether people have good idea really going to happen is unclear. I think it'd be helpful if office, the planning people could pull together some information, maybe bring in some outside guru who could give us some of what's likely to happen. Beyond that, it's going to be at least 3 years where we see it on the ground, what's going to happen. So some guidance would be helpful. I think 2 points that are very important going forward is transit-oriented developments has to be the key. The fact that there are some empty buildings doesn't mean we should sprawl development out to bail those people out. Better to take the buildings down and some, football fields or something. If it came to that, there's a lot of empty parking lots that maybe could be put to better use. But mainly, we still have what development we have concentrated in the transit areas, both for transit reasons and also because in order to get a viable restaurant and commercial area that all of us will enjoy, you got to have it concentrated. So there may be special uses that can fill in some of those buildings, but I think it's important that we be careful on that. Transit, whether we create new transit systems within Reston or not, is really important, but don't just throw to brand new development. Yeah, I like the idea of affordable housing possibly being there, but those folks need access to transit too. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Yeah, Bill, thank you for flagging that on transit. Yeah, my assumption is that we would only be talking about existing office uses outside of the TSA, outside of the transit station area. So there definitely are a few of those, but yeah, it would be much more limited. I wouldn't suggest, as a matter of fact, I'm not even sure how much progress we would make, considering all the rezonings that have occurred within the TSAs already. So, okay, thank you very much, Bill. John Mooney, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Walter. I absolutely support that we have a serious discussion about this. This was a position of Reston Association from the beginning that we needed to talk about it. And I agree with all of our colleagues who spoke about the need to do this thoroughly and carefully and in an integrated way. And we may not arrive at certainty about the answers, but at least hopefully we can have some certainty about the questions involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Let's go to Michelle. Michelle, you want to go next?
Sure.
Work your way up.
Yeah, I'd like to also agree with what Bill Penniman said. And, you know, before we just open things up to more housing sprawled out, that we consider that the land could be used for other things, especially in an area where, you know, we seem hard pressed to find some spaces for things like schools and parks. So that would be great. And to the extent that we could hear from just some more experts in the field to help provide input on what to expect, to the extent that anyone can expect or know what to expect, that would be useful.
All right. Thank you very much, Michelle. Burton, do you have your hand up there?
Hi, yes, I do. Thanks again. Getting a lot of talking time tonight. So I think besides the issue of land use, there's also a potential long-term impact on transportation and road use. So this you know, trying to assess the long-term effects of the COVID-19 does sort of open up a can of worms that this committee wasn't planning to cover when we started this, but I don't think that that means that we should shy away from it. I think that, you know, we want to help. And so, you know, I think it makes sense to deal with the reality that we're facing. And so we should probably deal with this if you'd like us to. And I've been following the news a lot and, you know, experiencing changes in my personal life. And I think there is going to be a long-term change to the way we live because of the pandemic. Partly because people have adapted to working remotely and they found out that it actually works pretty well. Kind of like we're finding out with this task force that, you know, there's definitely advantages to doing it remotely. We lose some things, but we gain some things too. Reston is going to have the advantage in the long term of being physically proximate to DC and federal government meeting places, but also a livable, green, you know, nice place to live where you can have a socially distant and comfortable lifestyle. So it's a place where I could imagine that there'd be a continued demand for housing and maybe less demand for office space. People still need a place to live, but the office places, they can do that remotely. They still have to sleep, they still have to eat, but the office place can be in their home somewhere if their home is built for that, especially. Thanks.
All right, Burton, thank you very much. Couple more comments and then we do need to move on. Tammy, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Walter. My question was much more simple. Except for if it's not in the TSA and it's not in the village center, is it around McDonald's that we're talking? There is some discrepancy of agreement about the TSA and how far does it go south in the area of the Wegmans in that latitude, if you will, or longitude. Where exactly are these? I'm not aware of a huge number of buildings that are vacant that are not in the TSA.
Yeah, Tammy, it's a great question. And just a couple of examples, Roger Bacon Drive, you know, the buildings around there. Lake Fairfax Business Park is another one. And
is that even in Reston? Is Lake Fairfax? Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, just barely.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, it's you're right, Tammy. I mean, we're not. Yeah. Okay. Jan, do you have your hand up as well? Jan? Okay. Might have lost Jan there. Let's see. Oh, a couple more folks. Larry Butler has her hand.
All right, thanks, Walter. Yeah, my question was really the same as Tammy's. If the county staff could identify those areas, it would help people on the task force put it in context that we're not talking about a large number of buildings if it's exclusively outside the TSA. Comment, I think Bill Penniman suggested maybe having some, we'll say outside counsel, not legal counsel, but outside counsel on, what the future may hold. I mean, what are, we can all guess what that might be, but you referenced, you saw some early data recently and things like that. So I think that might be helpful as well as if we're going to tackle this subject.
All right, Larry, thank you. Good suggestions to bring more information back. Okay, and then I see Mark Malcolm. You have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. There are a couple of things. Bill Penniman, Michelle Kimmel hit the key things. It's not just commercial or industrial property being converted into multi-use family dwelling. There is the potential on some of the edges of where you have current townhome that it could go the opposite direction toward higher density living. But the key points that come through to think about, it's not just the changes to transportation from what we currently have, but also the increased need for public transportation as you consider the having the affordable housing. But one of the considerations that come through in a longer range plan like this is also dealing with, if you do have vacant buildings or vacants, what's the remediation plan? The key difference or weakness of the existing comprehensive plan is this. How do you plan for publicly funded spaces where it's private development currently? That's the issue of the additional school or the additional parkland that doesn't exist, but will be needed with a higher residential density. That is a thing that I think needs to be addressed in the update of this plan. Thank you.
Mark, thank you very much. We actually have an attendee with his hand up, Mr. John Farrell. John, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Many of you know me. I've lived in Reston for 34 years, but I also engage in a certain amount of real estate work. And I would recommend two organizations, Walter, you might want to talk to about this phenomenon because it's happening right now. One is KLNB, because they do retail brokerage for retail facilities, and retail is getting killed right now. Anybody paying any attention, and those spaces are going to get repurposed. Those kind of retail spaces are not coming back. The other thing is to keep in mind is we've had 20 million square feet of empty office space since about 2010 in Fairfax County. How that breaks down in in Reston, I don't know, but we've already been dealing with that issue. But what I'm reading in my professional journals and in industry journals is high-rise multifamily projects, the loans are getting pulled. Real concern about WMATA ridership because of the contagion issue dealing with mass transit. Lenders are pulling loans or killing loans. The other, on the office side, you might want to talk to Jones Lang LaSalle. They're brokers that you might want to be talking to and have them come in and talk to you about this. The other thing, though, I'll say is, the statute says we're supposed to look at the comprehensive plan every 5 years. Not that we do that in Fairfax, but 5 years from now or 5 years from the date when this plan gets adopted, we'll have a much better picture of where it goes. And last thing is, I thought we already adopted some language, Walter, just after you went off the board, about repurposing office buildings. And I think there's some language already there. It's very clear. I mean, my office, I was in today, there were 4 people in my office where in the past there's been 40. So, yeah, we're going to be rearranging significantly our work system and our retail spaces. And so we can't forget about the retail side of it. Thanks.
Thank you, John. And that's actually a really good segue about the question about the repurposement policy. That actually is going to be in one of the slides from the Department of Planning and Development when we get to them. And we do need to move on. Are there any final burning comments or questions anyone wants to raise on this topic? I think we've gotten direction. We need to pull some more information together, get back to the task force. Anyone have any final comments or questions on this topic? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you do. Okay. Fantastic. Well, listen, great discussion, great input. Really appreciate that. It's very helpful. So let's now move on to the next item on the agenda. We have a presentation on the comprehensive plan, the policy plan, area plans, and how it all fits together. So, Chris, who's from your team? Are you starting this one off?
I am not, Supervisor. St. Clair's going to run the slides, and Leanna O'Donnell is going to start the presentation and then hand it off to Marianne Ty.
Okay, Leanna, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. I'm Leanna O'Donnell with the Department of Planning and Development. I'm the director of the Planning Division, and I wanted to provide an overview of the policy plan and implementation of the policy plan and larger area-wide guidance for Reston. Can everyone hear me okay? Is that okay? I just want to check. Thank you. So I wanted to just explain the organization of the policy plan and how that guidance is used during implementation. And then as Chris mentioned, we have a zoning case that we can walk you through and show you how some of that area-wide guidance was used in that review, and then also how the design guidelines are used in the development review. And I know that you've received a few presentations on the plan prior to this, but just as a reminder, the comprehensive plans are required by the Code of Virginia, and they look at long-range policies and recommendations for land use and for the preservation of resources. We are required to review the plan at least every 5 years, and while we do not update every section of the plan every 5 years, it is under review regularly during studies like this and other land use studies and our SSPA processes and policy plan amendments. So we are updating it more frequently than that. Again, the comprehensive plan, the purpose is to provide board adopted guidance to make decisions about the county's built and natural environment. And it reflects broad land use priorities, vision statements, and goals for guiding the built and natural environment, and provides general descriptions of the land use and intensity and the community's visions and goals for an area. The next slide shows how the comprehensive plan is organized. I know you've seen a couple of these before, but the area plans, along with the policy plan and a series of maps, guide the planning decisions in the county. And you'll see here on the left the 4 areas. The county is divided into 4 area plan volumes. Reston is in Area 3 and is in the Upper Potomac Planning District, just for reference. And in addition to the policy plan, we use area plan guidance. That's where the Reston guidance is located, which you're familiar with, and then a series of maps. The comprehensive plan map identifies the different land use categories, and then we also have the transportation plan map and trails map to help guide those land use decisions. The next slide, this is just very generally the difference between the plan and the zoning ordinance. The plan is a set of recommendations and contains general countywide as well as site-specific guidance for land use, and identifies the types of land uses and the amount of development that might be appropriate for an area, often identified in terms of dwelling units per acre or a floor area ratio measurement. The zoning ordinance is a body of regulations, is regulatory, and is used to implement the plan, and has different categories, different zoning districts such as R1, residential development at perhaps one dwelling unit per acre, and then commercial districts and PRC, for which most of Reston is zoned. The zoning ordinance sets more specific requirements for those uses and setbacks for properties and heights and amounts of open space that are required. And again, proposals for rezoning property to a new zoning district are reviewed against the comprehensive plan guidance for those areas. And so getting to the policy plan has a number of different elements, and these are the broad goals, objectives, and policies that are set by the Board of Supervisors for the county related to land use in these different topic areas. And I'm going to pull a few of these and just provide some examples of these elements of the policy plan, and then some objectives and policies that are included for these different categories. The first is the land use element. So the land use element is organized into 4 broad headings. We have land use pattern, intensity, the pace of development, and land use compatibility. And we have specific goals, objectives, and policies to provide additional land use guidance in these areas in terms of transportation, open space, revitalization, private sector facilities, and employment. And this policy A discusses review of with a review of a development proposal, looking at protecting and enhancing existing neighborhoods by looking at compatible land use, proposed density and intensity, and taking a look at if there are any adverse impacts that may be anticipated from a new development and how that could be mitigated. Examples could be landscape screening and buffering, architectural treatments of buildings, and looking at building height and review of those building heights. And here, this is another example in the land use element that again gets at the land use compatibility element of looking at height and transition. So in addition to site-specific guidance that we might have, we do have these broader policies in general that we look at during a development review process. The next slide, I wanted to highlight a couple of the appendices that are located in the land use element. One is the residential development criteria that are used in the evaluation of proposals for residential use during zoning cases. And here are the 8 categories that you'll often see highlighted in those staff reports to show the review of the site design and consolidation, addressing and discussing the neighborhood context of the existing development, environmental considerations, and then transportation, public facilities, housing, affordable housing, and heritage resources. Another land use element that's relevant to Reston, we do have countywide policy related to transit-oriented development, and these guidelines were developed to support the review of proposals in our transit station areas. It's to look at more compact, pedestrian-oriented, mixed-use communities. And so this is the general guidance that was adopted by the board to use when we're looking at planning those areas and reviewing development proposals for those areas. And so you'll see sort of the general the categories that we have for this guidance. Getting at not only where you are in proximity to a station entrance, but flexibility depending on the character of that station and the planned uses. But how those stations fit into the regional framework, any specific environmental considerations for those stations, and phasing of development, just to highlight a couple of those. This is the, we were just had a discussion about commercial building repurposing. Appendix 13 of the land use policy provides details, and that was the recently adopted or more recently adopted policy that was mentioned, that provides an opportunity to look at office building, commercial building repurposing under a number of performance criteria. And so this provides an opportunity for reuse of buildings that may not already be planned for these other uses, but that could be reviewed for those uses without revising the comprehensive plan, provided that a number of criteria are met. And it's organized by, depending on where you are. If you're in a TSA, if you're in a suburban center, if you're in a suburban neighborhood, you could look at evaluating an office commercial building for new uses, depending on where you are in terms of those categories. And the performance standards, we take a look at the criteria such as compatibility with the adjacent uses and structures, transportation, site design, school impacts, I think that was mentioned, parks and other public facilities, the environment, affordable and workforce housing, and historic preservation. So there are a number of criteria that are established, and we're glad to take a look at this policy, maybe with a closer look in terms of the conversation that you just had, and in terms of what you're looking at for Reston specifically. But just so everyone is aware that we do have countywide guidance related to that. The transportation element, I know that you've had some discussions with our transportation planning staff. That is one of the functional elements in the comprehensive plan. And this is an example of one of the objectives of referring to the use of public transportation and non-motorized transportation. Another example for transportation is objective 2, to increase the use of public transportation and non-motorized transportation, and looking at safe and convenient access, looking at bicycle routes, trails, crosswalk signals and markings, and those sorts of details. The housing element includes goals and objectives related to affordable housing, and a number of policies related to that. This one that we pulled out for you is a policy that focuses priority for the use of county and other government-owned buildings and land as sites for future affordable housing. This is a picture of the 270-unit residences at the government center property, an affordable and workforce dwelling unit development built on the government center property on Monument Drive, as an example of implementation of this policy. And then we have the environmental element on our EQC policy, Environmental Quality Corridor Policy, which focuses on habitat quality, connectivity, and hydrology, and stream buffering and stream restoration. So with the review of development applications, we do look at that for areas that may be included in our EQC system, and talk about ways to preserve those areas and avoid development in those areas if possible. Another objective in the environmental element includes taking a look at buildings and landscapes to minimize our use of energy and water resources, and green building. So this is another focus during the development review process in terms of looking at these policy plan objectives and those certifications as well. The public facilities element includes objectives to balance the provision of public facilities with growth and development. And the county reviews new public facilities through proffers during the development review process, and also through the county's capital improvement process. So we take a look at linking our CIP, capital improvement program, to our comprehensive plan as well in terms of identifying future needs. And we have two more, I think, that we pulled out. The heritage resources element promotes the stewardship of our historic resources. This objective focuses on our county inventory of historic sites, which is maintained by the county's History Commission. It's not a regulatory, it doesn't have any regulatory role. However, it's an honorific listing of our historic properties that then we review during the development review process in terms of discussing either preservation of buildings, but also documentation if that's not possible, or potential reuse of those buildings as part of a redevelopment. This example is the Silas Burke House on Braddock Road that was reused as part of a redevelopment for a Sunrise. We also, I know you received a presentation from the Parks and Recreation, from the Park Authority, and we have a Parks and Recreation element that focuses on providing that park system. And so when we see development proposals, we work closely with the Park Authority to determine the anticipated need that might be generated from a development proposal in terms of recreation uses, and that becomes part of our review process and discussions as well. And then finally, the revitalization element encourages revitalization in our older commercial centers that are listed. The commercial revitalization districts and areas are listed here on the right, and encouraging redevelopment in those areas by offering some incentives such as concurrent review of processing, of rezoning applications and site plans, and some administrative approvals of things like parking reductions and that sort of thing. Going back to the area plan recommendations, we have the policy plan guidance that we've talked a little bit about, and then the area plans. Area 3 is where Reston is located in the Upper Potomac Planning District, which the entire Upper Potomac Planning District is shown here. The overview guidance for each planning district also applies. And this is where you would find, for Reston, the inventory of historic sites tables, public facility tables, transportation maps for this entire area, for this Upper Potomac Planning District area. And then the plan guidance is further broken down into the planning sectors. And Reston has, as you all know, Reston has its own section in the comprehensive plan, where you would then find the more specific guidance for Reston. And I've just got a list here of some of the area-wide recommendations for Reston. I know there's some work being done on the planning principles, and then these are some of the area-wide recommendation headings, which focus on similar elements that I just reviewed for the policy plan. But I want to highlight that Reston has area-wide guidance too, in addition to the use of the policy plan guidance. So we look at the area-wide recommendations for Reston, specifically when we're looking at development proposals. And Reston also has, towards the bottom here, in addition to kind of these larger topics, specific guidelines for single-family and multifamily redevelopment, the village centers, convenience centers, offices, and the transit station areas. So that guidance is further developed. And then finally, in our TSAs, we do have development review performance objectives for the TSAs, and those are listed here. So in addition to the policy plan guidance, the area plan guidance, and then the Reston area-wide guidance, we also look at these performance objectives in the review of those particular development applications. Mary Ann Ty has a sample development case that we're going to walk you through to just show the application of some of those some of that area-wide guidance and performance objectives as well. Thank you, Leanna. My name again is Mary Ann Ty with the Department of Planning and Development. I'm in the Zoning Evaluation Division, and I'm a branch chief there. So what I just want to go over very quickly is how we review a development proposal against the comprehensive plan. And this is a simple case in Reston. It is in the TSA. It's on the edge. It's called the Reston Corner Development. It was a rezoning and special exception. It is where RA is. And what the application was, it was approved, I believe 2 years ago, to take the existing parking lot, the surface parking lot, and to add a residential building to it. So you see an aerial view here of the rezoning area, and then the surrounding area. And then the next slide shows you the site layout for the rezoning area. And you see it includes a parking structure, an above grade parking structure, because they were removing parking. and they needed additional parking to serve both the residential and the existing office. And then the residential building along Sunrise Valley Drive and adjacent to the office building. And then the next slide shows perspectives of the approved residential building. And you can see it from Sunrise Valley Drive, the building facade, and then how it fits into the surrounding area. And so looking at the next slide, the comprehensive plan guidance, we look at the district regulation. It is in the Reston Town Center transit station area. It's then in the Central Sunrise Valley District, and the graphic on the right shows the Central Sunrise Valley District. So it's about 205 acres in that district. It includes USGS, which is the major land area in that district, but it also includes guidance for this site. And so it talks about what the area is planned for. It's planned for office and light industrial uses. And it includes guidance for USGS. And then towards the end, it talks about for the areas within a half mile of the Reston Town Center station platform, residential uses up to 30 dwelling units per acre could be appropriate. And so this site is within a half mile radius. And you can see the applicant showed us the Metro Rail ring. So it's in the half mile radius, and we evaluated it against the comprehensive plan guidance. So when we're looking at the comprehensive plan, we're looking at the area-wide recommendations, which Leanna talked about, are land use, transportation, affordable housing, parks, public facilities, amongst others, as well as we look at the development review performance objectives, which go a little more specific, and then the planning principles and residential development criteria. Because all four of those guidance overlap in terms of subject matters, land use, affordable housing, transportation, parks, et cetera, we combine them into one analysis. So when you look at a staff report, you'll see a heading such as land use. And for this application, we looked at the land use guidance, and it talks about being within a quarter or within a half mile radius. This one is within a half mile radius. And the previous slide indicated 30 dwelling units per acre may be appropriate. This application proposed 29.8 dwelling units per acre. So that was the land use recommendation and the density that was proposed, and we evaluated that. And then the next slide shows affordable housing. And for that, we were looking at, if they're under 1.0 FAR, so if you're under 1.0 FAR, it's generally a 12% affordable housing commitment. Due to the construction type, it generated the need for workforce housing as opposed to affordable housing. So we had recommended to the applicant to provide 12% of the total number of units as workforce housing, which they did. And then the area median income levels typically in the policy plan are 80% AMI, 100% or 100 and 120% AMI. This applicant preferred to do it at lower tiers for the first 5 years, and then would go up to the recommended tiers in the policy plan of 80, 100, and 120. So we were evaluating the affordable housing. And then this slide, we then talk about the urban design. So urban design in terms of the site design, the building design. This one had a above grade parking structure, so we evaluated that, as well as the streetscape. So in terms of the building design, we recognize that the frontage is along Sunrise Valley Drive, and what would be appropriate for that. So we saw balconies there to provide some activation, to break up the massing of the building. And then along the facade against the office building, balconies were not as appropriate. Instead, the applicant provided an architectural treatment to mimic the banding of the architecture from the office building. So we saw that with the building facade. And then we also looked at the freestanding garage. From a staff standpoint, we thought it was okay. It's not ideal. We don't encourage above grade parking in the TSAs, but given that this garage was behind the existing office building, and so the office building screened it from Sunrise Valley Drive, we felt more comfortable with it. We also worked with the applicant on the design of the garage, shielding the lighting, and working with them on the treatment of the garage. And then for the streetscape, along Sunrise Valley Drive from the Fairfax County Parkway to Reston Parkway, there is a wider buffer area, vegetated area, and we really wanted to keep that same character. So we had recommended a wider landscape panel. And at the same time that staff was reviewing this application, the Reston design guidelines were being drafted and near finalization. So we took the design guidelines and had encouraged the applicant to create a streetscape that was more like the guidance from the design guidelines. And so that's what you're seeing here. They did more enhanced landscaping with this. They worked with, I believe, Dominion Power to figure out the spacing of the street trees along Sunrise Valley Drive. So the streetscape is something that they had worked really hard on with this application, and staff had worked with them as well. And then I think this is the last slide that I have. So these are some of the areas in which staff evaluates a zoning application in relationship to the comprehensive plan. And then finally, so the policy plan, we have the policy plan guidance, we have the area plan overview guidance, and then site-specific guidance that's used. And then we have the zoning ordinance provisions that are reviewed. And then we also have for the Reston TSAs, design guidelines for development that have been adopted by the Board of Supervisors. And these elaborate on the vision of the comprehensive plan and give recommendations for how to implement that vision through design. And these guidelines go into further detail than we might typically have in the comprehensive plan, where we're providing kind of general descriptions of the character of development and the new planned uses. But the guidelines for development will go into a little bit more detail and provide recommendations on how on site design, on building design, and specific streetscape elements. The design guidelines can be updated outside of updating the comprehensive plan to reflect maybe some new best practices or other types of trees that might be appropriate. So these reside outside of the comprehensive plan. And then specific to Reston, the Reston specific streetscape guidance help to flesh out these ideas by providing recommended locations, design strategies, specific plant recommendations, and graphics that can help the participants, developers, the reviewers, and the community in terms of having a common understanding of those design elements that can be used in the review process as well. And finally, again, the comprehensive plan is a guide and has general language providing our recommendations for land use, as well as site-specific recommendations. As an example, we may say, this area is planned for residential use at 16 to 20 dwelling units per acre. That's an example here in the third bullet. Or we might have an FAR guidance, or we might have a form-based plan. It kind of sets up the parameters for future development. The plan states the policy goals of the board in terms of land use, and includes those general descriptions of those intensities, targeted areas for redevelopment, and performance objectives often, which you saw for Reston. Those are used in the review, and some of our land use appendices have performance objectives for certain uses. The plan typically does not describe specific timelines for development. It's a long range guide, so it won't prescribe, in the next 5 years, this will happen, because we don't have a crystal ball. And so it doesn't outline a specific timeline for when development's going to occur, but it's setting up those parameters for redevelopment. The plan also typically does not get into details of specific community review processes that may exist in different supervisor districts in terms of how development proposals are reviewed with the community. And it also does not get into ownership type in terms of a multifamily building, for example. It won't prescribe if that multifamily building is going to be condo ownership or if it's going to be rental. And it also won't get into details of specific tenants. Sometimes with groups, we'll hear requests for certain retailers for a certain area, but that's certainly too specific for comprehensive plan guidance. It would stick to the use and intensity as we're looking at drafting plan guidance for our studies. I think that's what we had in terms of the policy plan and area plan overview. I know that was a lot of information quickly, but I'm glad to answer questions. Supervisor Alcorn,
Thank you. Thank you, Leanna. Thank you, Marianne. Yeah, that was a lot of information, but that was, I think, very helpful. I will see if there are any questions. And Leanna, will we be able to share this with the task force, these slides? Okay.
Yes, I think, yep.
Okay, great. We'll definitely do that. Does anybody have any questions or comments on anything in the DPD presentation?
I do. This is Lynn. I've got my hand up both on the participant panel, yeah, and I have it up here on the video. All right, Lynn, but I don't want to go ahead of anybody else that might be up ahead of me.
No, that's okay. I'm getting confused on the hands, so go right ahead, Lynn.
Okay. Well, first, I just want to thank both Leanna and Marianne for an incredible presentation. There is a lot of information, Leanna, that you kind of consolidated into a little bit for us to digest tonight. And I was wondering if you could go back to your land use objective. I think it was number 13. I just wanted to review that. It was kind of in the beginning of the presentation. I apologize. You know, maybe I should go backwards.
Yeah. Was it one of these, or did you have a particular question about? Yeah.
Right before this one, objective number 8. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the land use element, I just wanted to make sure that I understand, or that I understood that this is a priority for staff to protect and enhance existing neighborhoods. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate on this for us in terms of how it pertains to Reston, because I know Reston has its own comprehensive plan, and that there are certain elements that are incorporated into the Reston plan that may not apply or be overseen by Fairfax County in terms of incorporation into the broader plan. And there are actually several, you know, in terms of transit-oriented development and open space and the proximity of affordable housing to TSAs. There's just, I mean, I know you were jumping all over and I was trying to keep up with you, but there are just, I have a lot of questions.
There's certainly a number of objectives and policies, and, you know, we've pulled out one here and one policy. But sort of the structure of the comprehensive plan is these are the countywide policies and objectives for land use, and then we have those for transportation, housing, and the other sections. And so, for example, objective 8, and I'm just looking over on my other screen here. So objective 8 focuses on a land use pattern that protects, enhances, or maintains stability in established residential neighborhoods. The first policy you see here, and then there are a number of other policies that get at consolidation, you know, conservation and revitalization areas, and kind of looking at a number of items. You know, with the Reston, in terms of how this works with Reston specific guidance, you know, we look at all of this. So So when we're looking at plan guidance and that review, certainly we're looking at Reston specific guidance, and those policies that are related to maintaining stability of neighborhoods or transitions and things like that, specific guidance that might be relevant to Reston that's used as well. So this is kind of overarching guidance, and then we kind of narrow down what's reviewed.
That. Yes.
And I know this is there are certainly a number of objectives and policies in each of these sections, and I recognize that was a lot.
I mean, you did a great job of, because I can't imagine what you pulled this specific detail from. I'm sure it's a massive document, and I really appreciate. One of the other items that I wanted to talk about, and that is from a Reston perspective. When we, and I serve as vice president of the Reston Citizens Association, and Marianne, you've seen me testifying before, and I admire your work so greatly. But there are instances where this community is buying into design elements that are presented, but something happens in the process where there are exceptions that are made, and what we end up getting isn't exactly what we thought we were going to get. So I'm just going to put it out there right now that the Reston Citizens Association is going to offer, and I'll get in touch with you, Marianne, to talk about this further, but we would love to be able to work with the county staff and partner with you to make sure that what is promised to this community ends up getting really delivered to the community.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lynn. Mark, I think you have your hand up anew. Is that right?
Yes, it did. I very much appreciate the structure of the comprehensive plan because it appears to be approximately 5 levels. When you look at that, because of what's the policy, the various topic elements like land use versus transportation versus the other. And I use that term versus because of how it seems to have been applied across county staff. And one of the things that Supervisor Alcorn, you're already aware of, the Monroe Street scape, because the land use addresses it, policy doesn't really touch to it, transportation doesn't touch to that. So what you have when you talk to streetscapes through the comprehensive plan down eventually to the Reston element, and also what was approved as the additional thing in December 18. All of that is dependent on how the county interacts between FCDOT and VDOT. Otherwise, it will not happen. From what I've observed with FCDOT on that, if it's planned within what the developer plans are, that's one thing. But if it's unique to Fairfax County improving an existing road, the comprehensive plan application may not be even. So the issue that comes through, and looking at this great presentation, well-structured on that, is the consideration of emphasis that these are, while being guidelines, they have to be considered by other elements of the Fairfax County staff. And my instance of example was with FCDOT in particular on that, because they are a developer in this instance. Anyway, it's an observation that has with this of consideration, particularly with the streetscape. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, I know we're working with you on that particular issue too. So thank you. I see Tammy you have your hand up as well. Is that right?
Thank you. Again, thank you, staff, for your work in putting this together. Could people mute, please, because we're getting some feedback. What I didn't hear scares me to death, and I never once heard either one of you address the fact that the majority of Old Reston, Polo Fields accepted, is a planned residential community, PRC. That phrase never crossed your lips. That scares me, and I'm wondering why. Thank you.
Leanna, do you want to take that one?
Well, I was focused on the policy plan and area-wide guidance. If there, I don't think that was
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, I mean, Tammy, here's the thing. I mean, the PRC is a zoning category, and you know, so this is all, and we, you know, in Reston, we basically grew up with the PRC, and the rest of the county had the comprehensive plan first and then did zoning. We did the opposite, and now we're trying to go back and make sure the comprehensive plan is appropriate for where we want to go in the future, and the PRC is still there as the zoning, but Tammy, does that make sense? And I know there's more to talk about on this one.
I understand that, but what is different about a PRC is our comp plan has some ordinance power to it, whereas a non-PRC does not. And that is very important because prior to your ascension to supervisor, we had somebody who was hell-bent on making us urban. And we are all sitting here in rapt attention tonight because we are suburban with an urban TSA going through us. We do not want to become urban. We want to protect our environment, our Reston-centric principles, and this is very, very important. And I want to be sure the staff understands that going forward. And that would be my point. And thank you. I understand the difference between zoning and comp plan, but we can't divorce the two. PRC is very, very different from other areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. I appreciate that clarification. Gary, did you have your hand up to speak?
Yes, I did. I don't know if we want to take a lot of time for this because we're at the end, but I was hoping Leanna could talk a little more about the design guidelines in relation to the comprehensive plan, but maybe I could do that offline if you don't have time for that.
Certainly, they're a component of the development review process that are the design guidelines that were adopted by the board are not part of the comprehensive plan, but are used in the development review process. And I may ask Chris if he's available to, if you have a particular question about the design guidelines, we could certainly talk about that offline, or if you had a question now, you know, I can ask Chris to help with that piece.
Why don't I just get in touch with you? We can go.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Excellent. We got a few more speakers, and we are getting close to the top of the hour. Chris Daniel. Chris, did you want to go next? And I think Charles is after Chris.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Thank you, Marianne, Leanna, you're always fantastic, and everything you've done with ARB too. I have to echo Mark's comment about intercoordination with the other components of the county. That's a concern that the Architecture Review Board has noted in the past. It just seems like sometimes the messaging about these great tools isn't always shared, and then a poor, I would say almost innocent sometimes developer gets so far along, or county staff gets so far along, and then there's something that surprises them. And I only think about that as how can we improve those steps in any way? How can we make sure that folks are informed of all the wealth of data that you presented in this policy tool, is made evident. And I mean, I appreciate that you mentioned heritage and historic sites at the beginning of your conversation. Made me beam to know that that was even something that was up there. But it's a challenge, and I know it's a challenge that you can't solve from just your position, but it's something that I always got to advocate for.
All right, Chris, thank you. Let's go to Charles, and then I think Bill Penniman. Charles, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you. All right, Leanna, could you just flip down to the case study real quick? Okay, one more. All right, keep going. Yeah, one more. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Sorry, keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Oh, that's it, huh? There's one I saw in there that has a circle in it for the transit area. Oh, that's it. Yeah. Okay. I had a question. I've been trying to understand from the very beginning of when we talk about the transit area. And I know there was talk about even like reviewing where the transit planning area falls. And I hope I'm using the right terminology. And I know I've always understood it to be sort of like a zoning designation that it's like, for example, it's north of Sunrise Valley. And then I think it's south of some other places, and it's clustered along the road. So that, and it's always lined up in maps. But then the other thing I've seen is this dotted line here, the big circle. So when you're taking things into consideration as, as part of like transit-oriented development, do you go by that sort of that where those lines have been drawn in the plan, or do you go by that dotted circle, which is a radius from the station?
So we have mapped transit station areas in the comprehensive plan, and then guidance that also provides language that also provides guidance about what could happen between a quarter and a half mile walk. That's the example here. So depending on the we have geographic areas, and we could share a map too of that of the transit station areas that are not the circular, that are not the circular the radius that's shown here.
Are you saying then you could look at both? So you could look at where those lines are, but then if the circle goes outside those lines, you'd look at where the circle is also in terms of making recommendations and decisions?
Yeah, well, you'd have to look at the guidance for that TSA to see what it specifically says. And for this particular case, in this part, I might ask Marianne to jump in, but it would be, you would look at the particular guidance for the TSA and then additional performance objectives.
It looks like that one's outside of the TSA.
Yeah.
Looks like it's outside of the TSA, but it's within the circle. So then it got the high density housing.
So we would look at the comprehensive plan. This graphic is from the applicant. We actually look at the actual comprehensive plan and look at it where it falls in the TSA to make sure A, it's in the TSA, and B, whether it's in the quarter or half mile area radius. Sometimes an applicant may not map it properly. Sometimes we want to look at it ourselves. So it's a combination of graphics that we'll look at.
So it has to be both to qualify, or is it an either or?
For the most part, it's both.
Both, so it has to overlap, fit both criteria. Okay, I'm just curious. And then it sounds like in that case, it was office, so it made sense then to high density residential is not much different from office. It seems like it's compatible. Is that right?
Yes, and we also want to make sure, because the residential is next to office, there's appropriate transition. Because we think about if you live there, your neighbor's an office building, how do you transition an office user to a residential resident to an office? And those are key components of the review when we're working and talking with applicants. It's making sure those transitions within a development and then within the surrounding area. So sometimes you have developments adjacent to existing residential development. We want to make sure those transitions are appropriate and applicants are mitigating their impacts on their neighbors and surrounding area.
Okay, well, that's very helpful. Thank you.
All right, we have 3 more people, so we're running a little bit late, but let's do Bill Pinneman, Larry Butler, and Jason Besky. I promise to give you the last word. So, Bill, go ahead.
Walter, thank you. I'll make it easy. I tried to lower my hand about ago, and it's still there. So I don't have anything.
All right, that is easy. Thank you, Bill. Larry, is your hand up on purpose?
No. So I have no comment.
Okay. Wow, this is really easy. Okay, then let's wrap up then. Jason Besky. Now, Jason, I was going to call on you before this presentation. I know you had an idea you wanted to talk a little bit about. Do you want to do that right now?
Yeah, I do, and I think I can make it quick, Walter. Thank you. So I wanted to make one suggestion to the task force, and this is partially based on my day job, which is as a planner and working on a lot of plans. But I want to try to keep this at a policy level, and I think we can really use a comp plan as an opportunity as a task force to create some achievable ideas for the future of Reston, so to really start to create a vision. In a perfect world, we would, as a task force, really be able to get behind things at a fundamental level. But what I'm hoping to do is provide the suggestion that we, as a task force, would, we have all the intricacies of the comp plan, but I think it would be really nice to be able to step back and come up with some big ideas as a task force. Some of those things that we can all get behind at a fundamental level, understanding that there are intricacies involved. So what I would like to see come out of this potentially, and I think a way for us to move forward with excitement and inspired would be to develop some big ideas. What are the big ideas behind open space, for example, or mobility, for example? Just one quick example, and I won't go on too much, but we don't in Reston really have what we would call the heart of the community. One place that we could all go, if the Caps win the World Series, or better example, where do we go to protest as Restonians? So one big idea, for example, that I'm hoping people could get behind is, let's create a heart of the community. Is Reston Town Center North the place to do that, where we have a public open space where people can gather, where it's based around our civic functions in Reston? Then we can back into the strategies to make something like this happen. Also, Reston Parkway is a vital element to our community. Can that be a big idea that we, through the pandemic, I've seen it function so differently than it has in the past. How do we use Reston Parkway as an opportunity to connect to our open spaces, as an opportunity for leisure, or a range of mobility options from automobiles all the way to micro mobility and bike lanes? And then I think, Walter, what you brought up earlier, retrofitting these gray fields, these parking lots, the suburban office parks, I think that could be a big idea. So what I wanted to impart on the task force is, what can we as a task force do, or can we get behind some big ideas that can inspire us, that can, as Restonians, what can we impart in this comp plan at a policy level, so that moving forward, there's things that we have a vision at least. So that's what I want to leave you with that. I think it's a good way to kind of tackle things at a high level. All of us on this task force are never going to agree on everything, but perhaps there are some things, some big ideas that we can all get behind. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, Jason, thank you very much. I know we've run over a little bit. I see some comments in the chat. Yes, Jennifer, definitely. I know we have more questions. Please do submit additional questions to Jose. And we can actually schedule some more time for discussion at a future task force meeting, because I think some of these issues that have been raised in questions, I think, are very good and help everybody understand sort of the comprehensive plan process. This has helped flush out some things. And I know I said, Jason, you had the last word, but Michelle, you have had your hand up a long time. So did you want to get the last word in, Michelle, before we close?
Well, it kind of ties in somewhat to what Jason said, but I know that it's a question for staff that when we're writing the plan, as we're working on this, it seems there are some parts of the comprehensive plan that are sometimes not taken into account in the approval process. And so I'm wondering if we could get a better idea of how you pick and choose what you follow. And I say this because as we think about big ideas, well, there was one big idea for the Wheelie corridor that we would have higher education would be a focus. Yet we're pretty much done the development of this area, and that has not been a part of it. And there does not seem to be a situation where that's going to be the case. So I'm just wondering, to help guide us in our drafting, if some things, what do you pick and choose? How do you pick and choose? And if we go with bigger ideas, are we going to actually be able to see any of those?
Thank you very much, Michelle. I think that's a good place to stop. Why don't we have staff come back, if not the next meeting, at a soon meeting, and address your question, Michelle. And I know there were several others that were addressed. And then there are some other things that, if you do have additional questions, please do send them to Jose. So very good discussion. I hate to cut this off, but I really do want to try to keep us working within our scheduled time. So thank you to everybody. We are not going to do the October 26th meeting. We're going to take a little bit of a break. But in the meantime, please do contact me, contact my office with questions, with suggestions, and we'll work to compile a lot of the comments and discussion tonight into some things to bring back to the task force, including a process for moving forward to get us through all this. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, staff, DPD staff, for the presentations and all the support. And thank you, Jose and Lisa, for getting us through all this. So have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you all.